There's something about winter nights that feels different. The world outside slows down. The air is sharp against your lungs, and the snow swallows every sound. Footsteps, voices, even the snap of a tree branch. They all fade into that heavy, muffled silence. It should feel peaceful. But doesn't it sometimes feel too quiet? Darkness comes early this time of year. Streets empty before the clock even strikes 7. The shadows stretch long across the snow, and that blanket of white, so pure, so beautiful, also hides things. It hides footprints, it hides mistakes, and sometimes it hides people. Tell me, have you ever stepped outside on a snowy night and felt eyes on you, even when no one was there? Welcome to tonight's video, Whispers in the Snow. We're diving into 3 true-style horror stories where winter's silence wasn't a comfort. It was the perfect cover for terror. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at a snowy night the same way again. Before we dive in, let me quickly say, if you love creepy stories told late at night, if you crave that shiver down your spine when the wind rattles the window, then make sure you're subscribed to the channel. You don't want to miss what's waiting in the dark, because tonight, we're going to explore 3 chilling encounters. The first story is about a man seeking peace and solitude in a remote winter cabin, only to discover he wasn't as alone as he thought. Imagine footsteps crunching outside your door, circling, stopping, and waiting. The second story takes us onto a desolate road, where a traveler stranded in the snow realizes she isn't just being watched, she's being hunted. And what waits for her in the whiteout storm might be far more terrifying than the freezing night itself. And the third? It's a family holiday gone wrong. A Christmas Eve filled with warmth and laughter, until strangers in the snow began to sing outside their home. Songs you know, songs you've heard since childhood, but twisted, distorted, and growing louder with every passing minute. So grab a blanket, turn down the lights, and let yourself sink into the cold. Because winter may be beautiful by day, but at night it whispers. And those whispers, they're not always the wind. Stick around, because each story tonight will chill you in a different way. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button and join us. You'll never miss the next nightmare waiting just beyond the snow. Now, let's begin. There's something about being alone in the snow that makes silence feel heavy. Too heavy. Ethan, a 27-year-old grad student, thought it would be the perfect getaway. He rented a remote cabin deep in the woods, miles away from the nearest town, hoping for peace. No buzzing notifications, no deadlines, no noisy neighbors. Just him, the snow, and the crackle of a wood fire. The first night was exactly that. Peaceful. The storm outside was fierce, wind rattling the trees, but inside the cabin was warm. He set a pot of stew on the stove, sat in the old rocking chair, and let himself breathe. For the first time in months, his mind felt quiet. But by the second night, he noticed it. At first, it was faint, barely audible over the wind. The sound of crunching snow, like footsteps, slow, deliberate ones. He leaned forward, holding his breath, the stew spoon frozen in midair. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Someone was walking outside. He set the spoon down and moved toward the window, pulling the curtain aside just an inch. The storm had let up, moonlight reflecting off the white landscape, but he saw nothing. No lantern glow, no figure, no movement at all. Just an ocean of snow. He told himself it was probably a branch falling, or maybe the snow settling from the roof. But then, it came again. Crunch, crunch, circling. Ethan's stomach tightened. Whoever or whatever it wasn't random. The footsteps weren't leading away. They were moving around the cabin. He grabbed the flashlight from the table and pulled on his boots. Against his better judgment, he stepped outside. The cold stabbed him instantly, his breath forming clouds in the air. He swept the light across the ground and froze. Footprints. Clear, fresh footprints in the snow. They trailed around the cabin, neat, deliberate. But when he followed them, his heart skipped, because they didn't lead away into the woods. They just circled, around and around, like someone had been pacing, keeping watch. And then they stopped, at the back door. Ethan's pulse hammered in his throat. He scanned the tree line, but there was nothing. Just stillness. Just silence. He went back inside, bolting the door behind him. He tried to laugh it off, telling himself it was just some hunter passing through. But as the hours dragged on, the footsteps returned. Only this time they were louder, closer. He sat in the rocking chair, staring at the fire, but every few seconds, crunch, crunch, crunch. He could trace the path in his head. First the side window, then the back door, then the front steps. Whoever it was, they weren't knocking. They weren't trying the handle. They were just circling. When midnight came, the sound changed. A new one. Tap, tap, tap. His head snapped toward the nearest window. Something had tapped the glass. He swallowed hard, creeping forward. He didn't dare open the curtain this time. Another tap, then a scrape, and then a whisper. "Let me in." His blood ran cold. He staggered back, shaking his head, heart pounding in his ears. Maybe it was the wind, he told himself. Maybe it was just his mind playing tricks. But deep down, he knew he hadn't imagined it. The voice was real, and it wasn't just once. The whisper came again, drifting on the icy wind. "Let me in." That night felt endless. He dragged an old dresser in front of the door, hammered boards over the windows, and kept the fire low so it wouldn't draw attention. The cabin groaned under the storm, but every so often, between gusts, he'd hear it. Crunch, tap, whisper. Hours passed like days. Every muscle in his body was tight, waiting for the sound of the latch turning, waiting for a crash of glass. But it never came. Just the endless circling, just the whispers. Eventually, exhaustion overtook him. He sat in the rocking chair with a fire poker clutched in his hands, eyes half closed, waiting for morning. When he finally woke, weak sunlight poured through the boarded windows. The storm had stopped. The world outside looked calm again, quiet, untouched. Ethan shoved the dresser aside and stepped out cautiously. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he circled the cabin. His stomach twisted. There were no footprints. None. Not a single track. The storm had wiped everything clean, as if no one had ever been there. For a second, relief washed over him. Maybe he had imagined it. Maybe it really was just the storm and his nerves. But then he saw it. On the cabin door. A single handprint. Red. Smudged. Left at eye level. It wasn't paint. It wasn't mud. It was blood. Ethan stared at it, his breath shaking in the frozen air. Whoever had been out there all night, circling, tapping, whispering, hadn't been erased by the snow. They had left him a reminder. He locked the door, packed his things, and by the next afternoon he was gone. He's never gone back to that cabin. Never even looked at the photos he took there. But he swears, sometimes, when winter comes, and the first snow falls outside his apartment window, he hears it again. That slow, steady crunch. That whisper through the glass. "Let me in." Because sometimes the snow doesn't just hide tracks. It hides what walked them. Snowstorms have a way of turning familiar roads into something alien. Street signs vanish, landmarks disappear, and before long, every direction feels the same. That was the situation Hannah found herself in. She was 29, a nurse heading home after a long shift at the hospital. The storm had rolled in faster than expected, swallowing the back roads in sheets of white. She told herself she'd be fine. She'd driven these roads 100 times before. But this night was different. The snow came heavy, blinding. Her windshield wipers strained to keep up, squealing against the glass. The headlights reached no more than a few feet ahead, illuminating only a swirling tunnel of snowflakes. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel. She barely saw the bend in time. The car fishtailed, tires spinning uselessly on the ice. She tried to correct, but momentum carried her off the road and into a drift. The car jolted to a stop with a sickening crunch. She sat there for a moment, heart racing, her breath clouding the air. Stuck. She tried the gas again. The wheels spun, kicking up more snow, but the car wouldn't budge. She grabbed her phone, no signal. Not even a single bar. She groaned, shoving it back into her pocket. The silence pressed in around her. Only the sound of the wind howling across the empty fields. And then light. Headlights in her rearview mirror. Relief flooded through her chest. She wasn't alone. Someone had seen her car and stopped. She watched, waiting for the vehicle to pull up behind her. But it didn't. The headlights stayed where they were, maybe 50 feet back. Idling. Just sitting there in the storm. She squinted, wiping the fog from the inside of her windshield. She couldn't make out the make or model. Just two glowing orbs cutting through the snow. Minutes passed. The car didn't move. Didn't pull forward. Didn't reverse. Just sat there. Hannah swallowed, trying to convince herself it was nothing sinister. Maybe the driver was waiting out the storm, just like she was. Maybe they were stuck too. She kept glancing at the clock. 10 minutes. 20. An hour. The car never moved. And then she heard it. Crunch. Her eyes darted toward the side window. At first, she thought it was the snow settling on her roof. But then it came again. Crunch. Crunch. Footsteps. Someone was walking outside. Her breath caught in her throat. She held perfectly still, straining her ears. The sound circled the car, slow, deliberate, dragging on longer than it should. Her heart pounded. She reached for her phone again, even though she knew there was no service. Her fingers trembled as she unlocked the screen, pretending she could call someone, pretending she wasn't completely alone. The footsteps stopped. She sat there in silence, the storm battering the windows, her pulse ringing in her ears. She didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe too loud. And then tap. Her head snapped toward the passenger side window. A faint sound, like knuckles against glass. Her chest tightened. She leaned forward slowly, wiping away a patch of frost with her sleeve. No one was there. She slumped back into her seat, pressing her hands against her face. Her car was getting colder. The heater had been running, but she knew she couldn't keep it on forever. The battery light flickered ominously on the dashboard. The frost thickened on the windows. Her breath fogged the glass in front of her. She pulled her coat tighter and tried to stay awake, but exhaustion weighed on her. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard it. Crunch, 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 circling. By the time the second hour passed, her lips were trembling from the cold. Her phone had long since died. The headlights behind her still glared through the storm, unchanged. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She had to know. Hannah leaned forward, wiped the frost from the windshield with her sleeve, and peered through the smeared glass. Her stomach dropped. The headlights were gone. She blinked, leaning closer, squinting through the swirling snow. Nothing. No glow. No beams. No car. And worse, no tire tracks in the fresh snow. It was as if there had never been a car there at all. Her hands shook violently now. She reached for the ignition, twisting the key, praying the engine would turn over, that she could get out, that she could leave. The car sputtered, coughed, then died completely. Silence. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, panic clawing at her chest. The storm howled around her. The world felt utterly empty. And then, knock! Her head snapped up. The sound hadn't come from outside. Came from behind her, from the back seat. Her blood froze. Slowly, trembling. She turned her head toward the rearview mirror. Something moved in the shadows. Pale shape, a face, and then another knock. This time louder, against the inside of the glass. Her scream ripped through the storm, and the snow swallowed it whole. There's a certain magic to Christmas Eve. Snow falling outside, lights glowing warmly from windows, laughter echoing in the air. For the Miller family, it was everything they wanted. A quiet holiday in their rural home, far from the chaos of the city. The house was cozy, wrapped in garlands, a fire crackling in the hearth. Their two children, Lily and Jacob, had gone to bed hours ago, worn out from cookies and hot chocolate. Upstairs, stockings hung by the chimney. And downstairs, Mark and Sarah, Mom and Dad, sat together with mugs of mulled wine, enjoying the silence. But not everything was quiet. Their golden retriever, Max, sat stiffly by the front window, growling, his ears pinned back, body tense. Sarah frowned, reaching down to calm him. "What is it, boy?" Max didn't budge. His eyes were locked on the dark yard outside. Mark stood, pulling the curtain back. The yard stretched wide and open, covered in untouched snow. Beyond it, a dense line of pines swayed in the wind. Nothing moved. Nothing at all. "Probably a deer," Mark muttered, letting the curtain fall. But Max kept growling. Low, relentless. It was strange, but not enough to ruin their night. They poured another drink, whispered about gifts waiting to be wrapped, and let the fire warm their skin. And then they heard it, faint at first, barely there. A voice, singing. Sarah froze, her mug halfway to her lips. "Do you hear that?" Mark held up a hand, listening. It was coming from outside. Soft, distant, carried on the cold air. A melody both familiar and wrong. "Silent night, holy night." But the words dragged. Too slow, too warped. Sarah's stomach tightened. "Someone's out there." Mark moved quickly, grabbing his phone. He dialed the local police. The dispatcher explained they'd send someone, but with the storm, it might take hours. Hours. Mark cursed under his breath, hanging up. He went back to the window, pulling the curtain aside just an inch. That's when he saw them. Figures. At least 3 of them standing perfectly still at the tree line. Dark shapes against the snow, unmoving, watching. The singing grew louder. "All is calm. All is bright." Sarah clutched his arm. "Mark, what do they want?" He didn't answer. He just closed the curtain and locked the door. For a long moment, the figures stayed where they were. And then, slowly, they began to move, step by step, across the snow. Closer. Max barked wildly, teeth bared, fur bristling. The figures stopped at the edge of the yard. Just far enough to be shadows, just close enough to be seen. Their voices rose, blending together in that twisted hymn. "Round yon virgin, mother and child." The house seemed to grow colder. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. The lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the power went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room. Only the fire remained, a weak glow throwing jagged shadows across the walls. And then came the sound. Crunch. Snow. Moving closer. Crunch. Crunch. Footsteps approaching the front door. Sarah grabbed the children from upstairs, carrying them down in a panic. They were half asleep, confused, frightened by the dark. Mark whispered sharply for them to stay quiet. Then the pounding began. Fists against the walls, against the windows, the sound of something heavy dragging across the siding. And then worse, whispers, from the chimney. Mark's blood ran cold as the voices drifted down with the faint smell of smoke. "Let us in." Sarah pulled the kids into the basement, Max following close behind, barking furiously. Mark slammed the door shut and held it, his entire body shaking. In the dark basement, the family huddled together. Above them, the pounding grew louder. The singing warped into shrieks, into laughter. And then silence. Not fading, not drifting away, just stopping. Hours passed in that frozen quiet. The family didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe too loudly. Eventually, exhaustion overtook them, and they fell into a restless half-sleep, waiting for dawn. When the sun rose, the sound of sirens finally broke the stillness. Police arrived, crunching through the snow, calling out for the family. Mark led Sarah and the kids upstairs, opening the door cautiously. The house was untouched. No broken windows, no damage at all. And outside, the snow was pristine. No footprints in the yard, no drag marks, no sign anyone had been there, except for one thing. Near the porch, scratched into the snow with a stick, were words. "We will return when the snow falls again." The officers exchanged uneasy looks. They wrote their report, reassured the family, and left. But Mark and Sarah never spent another Christmas in that house. And to this day, whenever the first flakes of winter drift from the sky, Sarah swears she can hear it. That warped, broken hymn. Silent night, holy night. And she knows, somewhere out there, they're waiting. Snow has a way of making the world feel quiet, peaceful, safe. It softens the edges of sound, buries the sharp corners of the world under a blanket of white. But if tonight's stories prove anything, it's that silence doesn't mean safety. Think about it. In the first story, a cabin deep in the woods became a prison. Footsteps circling, crunching closer, only to vanish into the snow. The kind of thing you could mistake for paranoia until you realize something was out there, watching, waiting. In the second, a lonely road turned into a nightmare. A stranded woman thought salvation had come when headlights appeared. But salvation turned into something far worse. The car that never moved, the footsteps that circled her, the impossible truth that snow itself swallowed the evidence, and that final whisper on the glass, proof that not every haunting leaves a trail. And then, of course, the family celebrating Christmas Eve. The warmth of a home turned cold by voices that didn't belong, by figures that sang a hymn no human should sing. The police found nothing. No footprints, no intruders, just a message carved into the snow, promising a return. Snow erases, it hides, conceals not only tracks, but truths. That's the real horror of winter. It's not just the cold or the isolation or the storms. It's how easily the snow itself becomes an accomplice. How it covers what you're not supposed to see. How it muffles the sounds you're not supposed to hear. And maybe that's why so many of us feel uneasy walking alone on a snowy night. Because every crunch of your boots echoes louder. Every shadow stretches further. And sometimes, you hear footsteps that don't match your own. So here's a thought for you. The next time you're outside at night, and you hear that sound, the steady rhythm of something walking across the snow, don't rush to look. Don't fling open the blinds. Don't convince yourself it's just the wind. Because sometimes, what's out there doesn't want to be seen. It just wants you to know. It's waiting. Winter nights are quiet, yes, but they're not empty. And when the wind howls through the trees, rattling your windows, carrying strange voices across the frozen air, listen closely. Because sometimes, those aren't just the whispers of the storm.